short attention span theater person. So as we're developing our into that awareness and moving along into front, we're developing our awareness of, and then we live from that space of awareness, and we kind of ignore our thoughts at that point, or are just because how do you function? I was just wondering, how do you function in the world as a everybody? How do you function in the world?
Because the world's not other than your awareness.
Okay, right on. Okay, all right. So it's really tough. So you're in the primal awareness. You're like,
And
your
it
thoughts
just
are
all
rising.
comes down to this clinging we do to this idea we have that's been habituated over lifetime after lifetime, so much so that it seems real. And all the people we live with were on the same level of vibration, so to speak. So we're reinforced again and again and again. This is real, this is real, this is real. And that's what's stopping us. So when you think about when Gaura Rinpoche is teaching meditation, okay, what? Two aspects, he says. One is mindfulness. And the Sanskrit, and I think the Tibetan word too, but the Sanskrit word for mindfulness has the root of to remember in it. So whatever your object, and it can be your breath, it can be counting, it can be a little Buddha figure that you're just focusing on, it can be a vast visualization, but the process is the same everywhere. It's just some object of meditation that you are being mindful of, that you're recalling. And so what happens? We get distracted. Our mind gets too busy, and suddenly you realize, oh, I forgot about the object of meditation. Bring it back. The mind gets dull, sleepy, whatever, or just zoned out. Same thing. You forget, you remember that you forgot it. So you come back to it. That's mindfulness. Again and again and again and again and again. But what catches the lack of mindfulness is the awareness. So Gaura Rinpoche says that in the beginning, this awareness is like the little glowing tip of an incense stick. And when you find an obstacle, you just burn it. So the awareness destroys it naturally. You don't have to do anything. The awareness itself. But again, most of us, from having read and whatever, we're looking for like fireworks or something. And so we can't believe that we have Buddha nature. We can't believe that awareness is it. So what happens is, as you continue with the meditation, the abiding in the awareness becomes greater and greater, and eventually the mindfulness goes away because you never forget. You're just in a state of awareness. But it's a very high state. So this is like in tantric practice, for instance. I mean, that's one thing that's why it's generally considered not for beginners unless there's a certain karma. Why? Because your focus of meditation is this vast mandala. It helps to have something concentrated. So Gaura Rinpoche says, just focus on the seed syllable, because that's doable. And actually, the whole damn thing is there. So you're not like doing some sort of, beginner's thing, or hey, the kids are over here at the kids' table on Thanksgiving. No, this is the real deal. That hung there's a beautiful phrase, I'll have to find it for him, the founder of Tantric Buddhism in Japan, Kobo Daishi. He's a cultural genius, but he has this wonderful description of the letter Hung. It's the universe and all the universe and everything, just in that little letter. So, but my point is that it's this mindfulness, and then there's a natural progression of just doing the mindfulness, things calm down. The thoughts don't go away, but they're not screaming for attention anymore. So, but eventually they go away because you're not feeding them all the time.
So at that point they go away. Sorry. So at the point they go away, I know this is going to sound so just dumb, but like you're able to drive a car and go to work and and still read books.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So,
sure.
And the awareness it's not thinking, but it is thinking. So I just
it's awareness.
Okay. Very good. Very good.
It's not cogitating.
Yeah.
But it's perfect.
There we go.
It's perfect understanding of what the situation is, what's necessary. That's why you'll see, again, I keep talking about Gaura Rinpoche because I have that kind of confidence in him.
Yeah, he's a real deal.
That it seems like a very kind of, you have some sort of difficulty or suffering or some place where you're stuck. You don't even think of it that way. You're going to see him and say, well, I'm going to ask him this, and I've got some wonderful, good-sounding thing that sounds like, oh, Frank's a good student. He'll be happy that I'm asking him like this. Not seeing the incredible glue in my mind, the raging egoism. But look, I'm wearing a Tibetan shirt. I got a mala. That's all the games we play. It's ridiculous, but nonetheless, but an enlightened teacher like that can do something that is just like completely spontaneous, unfabricated, which somehow, and again, not like you'd read about it in a book, that your experience of whatever that interaction is a great teaching because it's done with all that stuff. It's just the free flow of the mind and really always perfectly what you need at that moment, or not. I mean, again, you can have this experience. I'm sure we all have. Is that you're at this for some time, and then you suddenly have some sort of like a psychological insight. I'm not nothing really profoundly spiritual, but nonetheless, you can have a psychological. You can see into some sort of difficulty you've had, some sort of wrong attitude that you've had, and they can be nasty too. And then you realize that all this time, Gaur Rinpoche saw that. He never pointed it out to you. Why? But there are plenty of examples in the tradition. That's what Marpa did to Milarepa. He did point it out. But in America, you generally can't do that because we don't have the necessary faith. We're going to get off into I'm being abused. Oh, good grief. Whatever. We run off into our kind of social ideas. And
I thought the whole fact that you were becoming a triggered, angry jerk is proof that you need to work on something.
All right, good, Keen. Okay, I'll tell that one because this is exactly it. I mean, so when we had the old on the old retreat land, and we put up this tent, and maybe the first time that he came, not the first time the Gaur Rinpoche came, but the first time he came to this big week-long event that we did. So everyone's sitting in a tent, 100 people, and hot summertime, unawkward on the ground, and everything. But still, he's there. And because I was Ayan Rinpoche's representative, they had me sitting, like from, like from maybe where Steffi is to here. Is that far? He's on a throne, and I'm just sitting there, And all the organizational responsibilities, in between teaching sessions, I should have been like drinking water because it was hot, but instead I was running around talking to people and doing what I do. And so I came back and I was getting a little cranky, and I sat down and I was thirsty as hell. And I basically my my path has been one of a skeptic. Always critical, not really anyway. So I was going to challenge, I'm sitting there silently, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to do a little test. I don't believe any of this mental stuff, okay? So give me a sign. And I had that thought, give me a sign. And I just happened to look up. And while I was having that thought, but before I looked up, he had a big, giant green grape. And he threw it at me. And so I'm thinking, give me a sign, throw, but I don't see it, right? And so I look up. There's a green grape coming at my head. It's about time. And I had no time for thought. I just went like this and caught it in my hand.
Wow.
So he knows your thoughts when the thoughts are important thoughts. But then you feel pretty good about that. Yeah, oh, good. And then you realize the nasty thought that I just had 10 minutes ago. He knows that too. And he's not coming down heavy on me, but, could. And if my confidence, faith was enough, I could benefit from that. But he's not trying to show off. He's not trying to do anything other than help you. It so completely turns the world upside down when you meet someone who cares more about you than you care about yourself. I mean, it's just the whole world is wrong.
Super dad.
Yeah, super dad. And that's, in the Lankavatara Sutra, Buddha said it's a turning about in the deepest seat of consciousness. They have a term for it in Sanskrit. But that's what's so radical. It's this complete turning about. And suddenly the whole world is seen as, and Garam Rinpoche has also said that the whole practice is, you think of all the relative aspect of the practice, conventional, is that you train yourself to consider everyone, every being, as having been your mother in a previous lifetime. And of course, there are supportive meditations of all the things my mother did for me. Even if she's a crack addict, I'm here, I'm alive, I get this precious human body. So that's the relative aspect. Then the ultimate aspect is you just consider it all dreamlike. And so no matter what kind of malarkey is going on, if you actually do recognize it as dreamlike or even convince yourself, it's not as bad. It's only when we totally attach to it and it becomes god-awful, absolute real, and whatever, I'm compelled, I have to do this. So in a way, like this teaching that he just gave, it's really very simple. It's just awareness. But we want drama, and we want all sorts of stuff, and we want some awareness being to hit us over the head, and that kind of thing can happen too. But it's a mistake.
You used to do that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, were you the guy at the Zen Center with the stick?
Yeah, I did.
Frank was the guy at the Zen Center with the stick who would hit you while you were meditating.
Kiyosaku.
What do they call it?
Kiyosaku.
That's great. Like we bend down. And
The Japanese culture is so.
Those guys, the Dharma folk.
Yeah, well, that's the gecko in Tibetan.
Okay.
They do have a guy who,
Gecko.
yeah, they got a stick too, but not in the formal meditation. They're just keeping the monks straight.
You're like a mafia.
But there too, I think this book that we've been reading, this Geshe actually told a story that happened in his lifetime in Tibet, where, these big monasteries like Sera, they had like 10,000 monks. They were these amazing kind of university institutions, and they would have the morning pujas and that, and they have rules, and so the gecko, the disciplinarian, you have to follow the rules. And one of the rules is, in that particular time, you can't have your zen. It's like a shawl or something. You can't have it over your head during the puja. And there was one monk. So here's this row of 300 monks, and there's this one guy with zen over his head. The gecko's instructing him, no, don't do that. But he just keeps doing it. And he was making sort of like a tent like this, because it was falling over, so like some sort of surface in here that you couldn't see over his pacha stand. So finally, actually one of the head monks got up to go over and basically talk to him, see what was going on. And the monk could see underneath the zen, and he had the entire visualization produced there. So his mind was projecting the visualization so that other people could see it. So that's a very high state of development. But because he wasn't following the rules, they kicked him out of the monastery. Because it's important. It's important. It's not an ego trip. And not that he was doing an ego trip, but his refusing to, do the ethics, is fundamental. Yeah, ethical discipline. And so it's the advantage for us is that the Tibetans have been doing this for more than 1,000 years, and they've seen pretty much everything, really everything. And that's really helpful because they have such a human aspect to it. They're not like putting people. I mean, it's so amazing how they can do it, because they can put someone on the throne, and because they have this respect for Dharma, they don't have to try to trick themselves into that person necessarily being something other than what they are. At the same time, they're able to see them as a Buddha, which is a meditation, and consequently, their culture has people who actually are Buddhas sitting there too. That's really so helpful because they have teachings like how close should you be to a lama? And so here we have Tibet, right? It was like Norway or something, all these valleys and, local but vast geography. But, they didn't have the wheel. You didn't travel around. I mean, they did, but nonetheless, not easily. So you stayed in your, and that's what's interesting. Their written language, for instance, unites them because they can all read it, but the dialects are so strong they can't understand many of the dialects. Wow. Kempo, he'll make jokes about that sometimes. It's funny. And there's one area in eastern Tibet, the Goloks, and everybody complains about them all the time because nobody can understand what they're saying. But they can all read perfectly, so they're all saying the same word, but at any rate. So, how close do you want to be to the Lama? We said, well, it's like fire. He said, if the Lama needs to be one valley away. Because if the Lama's in your valley, it's like you're too close to the fire. It's too hot. If the Lama's 2 valleys away, it's too cold. You need to have the right. And so these Lamas would travel around, and you'd hear these, and they'd come back like once a year or something. And of course, they'd be there, and someone would ask a problem, something. The Lama would give instruction. Okay, I want you to do, 100,000 Vajrasattva's and stop beating your wife. They give all this kind of advice, right? What? And then in that order, and then the Lama would come back the next year, and what have you done? Well, nothing. But instead of this kind of, you can imagine us in school. You did wrong. You didn't do it. We have this kind of Protestant kind of shaming kind of thing. But the Tibetan style was, I didn't really hear what you said right. So they have these very skillful ways of ameliorating all of this instead of the harsh edges, right or wrong. It recognizes human beings. And that's so helpful because then in the meditation, we tend to be very judgmental of ourselves. It's not working. I should be doing better. All of this. So the key thing is the confidence to just keep it going. And, I mean, truly, there's nothing wasted. None of those times are wasted. You can just, you can spend truly years just repeating things like a monkey. I mean, Lama Tarchin would always say, I'm like a parrot in a cave, just repeating. He said, I don't have any wisdom at all. But that fact of even just doing it, this is what's hard for many people in the West when it comes to Buddhism. They can't appreciate the Tantra because, yes, there are, in one sense, all objects of meditation are kind of the same. It's the fact that you're concentrating on something, that's good, that process, that's fine. But in the Tantra, that seed syllable is actually more powerful. That's hard for us to believe because we don't have that kind of faith. Some people more easily believe it, but I'm just saying generally in the public, many people who come here, they wonder, why do we even bother with the Tantra? Because it seems to be so demanding and so much to learn and kind of overwhelms people. And, we could just do like quiet meditation, and that's fine. But again, Lama Tarchin, he says there are 2 ways to Buddhahood. You can go in a cave, do one practice, and your motivation is to help all sentient beings. When you get into the higher bhumis, you can manifest as many beings as you want to help other beings. They can actually show up. And at the higher levels, the manifestations aren't even aware that they're manifestations. But in the beginning, they are. So you got like 4 helpers that you've manifested through your meditation practice in the cave, but it's still for all sentient beings. He says, or you can go to a temple and learn the full range of the teachings and tradition, and you can present that to beings, because you never know what someone needs. People are different. Not I don't mean different levels, just different interests, you might say, or whatever. I remember back in the beginning, I had spent 16, 17 years at the Western Zen Center, and the second retreat I went to with Lama Tarchin was at Mount Baldy Zen Center. They were taking their month off; it was their summer off, and so they rented it at Lama Tarchin, and I remember one of his students coming up and doing a prostration to him when he just sort of got out of the U-Haul truck that he had driven here in. And I remember being very critical of that because I was just thinking, this is just like, like lower practice or something like that. But you keep going, and you start seeing your own arrogance, and yeah, you start seeing more and more. All helpful. Yeah, Keen.
Don't we have a problem with, some of the, yeah. I just was thinking about a couple of things like where spontaneous joy and spontaneous arising.
It's still off. Yeah,
Is it off? Off power?
yeah. There's 2 on switches. Sounded good there. No,
I think I hit the wrong button.
that sounds good.
Check. Is
Yeah.
that better?
That's good.
Okay. I was trying to think about how spontaneous joy, and spontaneous rising,
Mm-hmm.
the seed syllable, and us Westerners having a hard time with like undefined. Like the seed syllable to me almost seems like it's pi. You know what I mean? It's kind of infinite, even though it's not. But it has that kind of energy to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just trying to. Don't we have to be kind of more open to that?
Yeah, if one naturally is, that's great. But the stuff is so wonderful and truly rare that even if one finds oneself with all sorts of skeptical and doubt and stuff, but still somehow involved in it, that is just remarkable karma. It really is. Excuse me. The whole thing unfolds, and everybody's path is different. That's the thing. Yeah, truly, amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. But the gradual nature of the path is very helpful to understand, because then you suddenly immediately have more patience with yourself and are not looking for results. One of the most difficult things is that people are always looking for results. And yet realization comes when you stop that, if it's sincerely for a moment. It suddenly, it can be complete clarity, but there's just no obstacles. It's just clear. One can function perfectly. But the confidence, yeah, what keeps that going? Now, for the Tibetans, that's what's so helpful for them, because they have a whole culture. So it's just like I have confidence in Einstein, although I don't really know what I'm talking about at all. But I got a cultural support there in a good way, in a good way. The Tibetans have that with Dharma. You meet Tibetans, they don't really know much Dharma at all, but, they have confidence in it. And so it's amazing to us because we have a little bit of meditative experience and kind of get excited, and the teacher will say to you, burn it. Take inspiration, forget about it. Because it's not about that. It's about the great compassion.
Frank,
Yeah.
how do you relax into not going after results?
Well, that's by exhausting the mind that wants results. Yeah.
That seems really hard.
It's completely easy. You don't have to do anything.
It is interesting. A great teacher, maybe it was somebody else, but they said, well, if you get rid of everything else, you're left with happiness.
There you go. But we start to have more appreciation is the wrong word, but realize the profundity of experiences that we've all had. You can remember like being 4 years old, and suddenly the first spring that you remember, and there's a whole big green field that's like full of dandelions. The vividness of it. So this is even in the teaching of the of the visualizations in that. That's what's very helpful for us, because you realize, what is it? Well, there's knowledge. There's knowledge. We need to train ourselves in the symbolism in that and what it means in an intellectual way. But then in resting in that visualization, actually doing it, we're actually absorbing the qualities. We're abiding. It's no longer conceptual. But we know. So there's meaning. But then there's clarity. And then there is this, the vastness. It's limitless.
Is that why the Tantra is so effective? Is because you're using the visualizations and they're also tremendously virtuous?
Yeah. And because it's like it gives you some form to grasp onto. I mean, with Dzogchen and Mahamudra, I mean, it's all right there, yeah, but at the same time, conceptually, it's kind of hard for us because we want something to relate to. But now, instead of relating to the stuff that we do all the time with all the problems, it's mind generated. So immediately there's a level of purity because you know you're dealing with your mind, and so it's like more effective because you can do things with your mind and you're not stuck in the body. The body of the deity is a mental projection too. So it's extremely skillful, but it has to be so solidly anchored, so to speak, in emptiness. And what is that? All mother sentient beings to be free. You know? So we can do it right now. We can do it right now, no matter what level we're at, because we've all had a mother. We can all think about mothers, and we all see all the sentient beings. So there's like there's no obstacles. And that's the greatness of it, by presenting the full range of the teachings, because it guaranteed to work, but we got to do it. So yeah, you can be surprised. You can be in the midst of meditation, and people have these experiences, and even when they aren't necessarily realization, they're still strengthening for us. You can be in just kind of like excruciating pain, really. And then for some reason, especially in the bigger retreats, there's like kind of a collective energy. And the next thing you know, something changes, especially with the mantra, and your pain's gone. Where did it go? I mean, physically, it's the same body, same chemistry going on. No.
Frank, what do you tell people who say there's nothing that needs to be done?
Well, see, this is difficult, Rogo, because again, when we're dealing with people in a conceptual way, what they feel I think, more important is, without them even knowing it or being told it, your level of commitment. And that means the deep peace that's there. I forgot what I was going to say to you.
Okay.
What to tell them when you say?
What do you tell people who say there's nothing that needs to be done, and that it's the doing that's causing all the problems? That I'm getting attached to the doings and the mental churnings and the mental
And also, the experience is that you can say the right words to someone, and it triggers something in their mind. Like, why is he telling me that? They're not listening to what's being said. It's a very good quality to be able to objectively consider something. Like I say, the rational mind is the greatest helper and the worst master. It's a great servant, a terrible master. So, but you made me think. So way back when, I haven't seen it now for I don't know how many years, 20, 30 years, all these shows on CGI that they got into, not CGI, forensics. They had these network shows. And so they had this guy way back in the beginning. I don't know the name of the actor, but he was like supposedly this brilliant guy, but he was very like socially awkward and stuff. And so the show, the people who wrote the show CSI, thank you, had done some reading. And he was always saying, like, if you meet the Buddha, kill him. Well, yeah. Sure. If you're at a very, very high level, any concept of the Buddha, yes. But that's not you, Mr. CSI. Being broadcast across America. I'm sure, what could go wrong? So what I'm saying is that but again, we have this great advantage of being able to, he doesn't come here anymore, but with a teacher like Garam Pache, you can see how he interacts with people. And there isn't any of that stuff going on. I mean, that's what's amazing to me. He's not out there trying to convince anybody of anything. And yet that generates, one has the karma, the deepest kind of commitment. I don't know. I came to the Dharma. What was motivating me was from a young age, a terrific fear of death. I mean, before I discovered the Dharma, it was like I just couldn't think of anything worse. We're in this situation. You're going to die. If you're terrified of dying, what do? Commit suicide? That's the problem. So you're guaranteed to be screwed. It was like I just could. And that's tough. And I always, you hear these stories, and even in the news, people, firemen and policemen and soldiers, people, mothers sacrificing their lives.
About your mom when you were driving the car and she was
Well, later. But nonetheless, I was so impressed. I couldn't understand how anyone could sacrifice their life. I just couldn't understand it. It was so terrifying. And then, when Megan was born, I found myself, because she was squawking and not sleeping, and I'm walking around holding the baby at 2 a.m, wherever it was, and I was just looking out the window, and it suddenly occurred to me that I would give my life for her. So those are what comes through the practice, is that, there's a moment like that. That's not a realization in the sense of where they're talking about emptiness and all these wonderful things. But actually it is, because there's a degree of less clinging to the self. That's all it is.
That's beautiful.
That's all it is. And so my point being for us Americans too is that we don't have to go to a monastery or whatever. We do what we're doing. But now we're doing it with awareness instead of whatever we were doing it with before.
Right. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Frank.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I seem to have messed up your whole entire speech.
Well, that's all right. This is a good night.
Did you have a speech prepared?
No.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Speech.
There we go.
I've been here for almost 20 years.
All right, so I'm going to tell you one more speech story then, since we're on a roll, right? Forgive me, some of you have heard this before. But so the first time Garchen Rinpoche traveled around the country, we were sponsoring his visit. And I was the one who didn't want him to come. Because, he needs a translator. We've never had teachers that need translators. We got to hire somebody. I mean, we don't have any money. It was just like, oh, blah, blah, blah. But he came, and so he's here, and he was going to give a talk at the Unitarian Church, and they have it's like a stage, a little low stage kind of thing, and they had 2 lecterns with microphones at either end, and Garamche's sitting on a chair behind. He hadn't approached his lectern yet, and they had me introducing him. And so I'm up there talking into this mic, and I was starting to get a little emotional because I was talking about Tibet and that kind of the genocide and just all this kind of stuff, And then while I was sort of gathering momentum and speed, Garbache picked up his mic and he went, "Oh!" clearing his throat as only a Tibetan can. While he's doing his prayer wheel. Everybody laughed. It stopped me dead in my tracks. And I realized, wow, let's have him talk instead of me. But to me, that's the practice. It's one of falling down again and again and again, but with good motivation, There's really always something pure in there in the midst of it. And so you start to see that you're really not 100% shit. Even in the midst of our delusion.
That means I'm a little.
That's right. Even in the midst of our delusion, in the midst of our wrong acts, there is a spark of purity, just to put a word on it. And so this is really wonderful because we're actually given, support in a very, it's easy to feel good when things are going good. But when they go bad and then, you have the support like that, really amazing. Yeah. Also, Lama Tarchin's American wife, she told me once that what's so tremendously helpful with teachers of that quality is that the purpose of a Dharma center is to allow the Lama's wisdom mind to flow through the whole thing. It touches everybody, and people get benefit that they don't even know. But nonetheless, the whole thing is just to not upset that flow, and that's this very simple kind of devotion, but it's actually very profound. So to the degree that that happens, it's really a wonderful thing and just completely helpful in all sorts of invisible and visible ways. So we've been very fortunate in that regard, actually, because Garchon Rinpoche he's remarkable. Somehow he doesn't piss off anybody. All right, well, I think that's enough for tonight. It was all prepped. I had my Mahamudra book to go into the Four Noble Truths in addition to our... no, that's quite all right. It's quite all right. Yeah, the gradual nature of it, the increasing subtlety and depth, you might say. I was going to show tonight just how, something like the Four Noble Truths, this first, the book that we've been using, it said that the Buddha turned the wheel of Dharma 3 times. First turning of the wheel is the Four Noble Truths. The second turning of the wheel is the perfection of wisdom. And the third turning of the wheel is Buddha nature. The Tibetan traditions differ in their emphasis in this. The Dalai Lama's tradition, the Geluks, they say that the second turning of the wheel, the teachings of great emptiness, perfection of wisdom, that is the definitive teaching. And the other two, the first and third turnings of the wheel, are provisional. They're just, getting you there, so to speak. But the Nyingma and the Kagyu, us, say that both the second turning of the wheel, great emptiness, and the third turning of the wheel, Buddha nature, are both definitive. And that it's the first turning of the wheel that's the provisional one, about the suffering nature of samsara.
Was Raj here also agreed? Was that the second?
Yeah. So I was going to show tonight, because in the teaching that this Geshe is doing on the Four Noble Truths, it's great because you can understand it so intellectually and directly. But in the Mahamudra one, it's a little more inner, and you'll see you can either think of it as more abstract or it's more deeper experience. I shouldn't not right to say as if the one's not deep. Not at all. I don't mean that. But again, all these different, like Rinpoche says, these different traditions, these different teachings, these different, it's like different facets of the same jewel. And by looking at the facets, it's not a problem for the teachers, but for the students, it's a great benefit, because you look at one facet, you have to figure out the other one. You're starting to see, the interrelationships in that, and it's all good. But anyway, we'll save that till next time. Okay, so let's dedicate the merit. See if I can find a prayer in here for that. Maybe I can't. May the ever-brightening sunlight of the virtuous thoughts and deeds devoted to this treatise illuminate the dark ignorance of sentient beings. May the luminosity of their self-comprehending awareness increase. May I, too, gain the unobstructed good opportunity of associating myself with this supreme path throughout all future lives. May I realize the Dharmakaya directly and before long, and fulfill the wishes of innumerable sentient beings. May every last one be free. Svaha. Okay, thank you, everyone. It's kind of fun on a cold night. Yeah. Yeah, right.
Think about it, 20 degrees warmer than yesterday. And then it's going to be in the 30s, I think, on the weekend.
Really? Good. Yes.
I'm hoping the lake would freeze. I mean, the bay.
Yeah.
You can run across it.
I noticed a little Arundecoit Creek by us is starting to freeze on the edges.
Oh.
this keeps up, it could freeze over.